every month, the world changes 4 times over. We've had, since our last meeting, assassination attempts, presidents drop out of the races, and the world just continues to get into a state. So with that, Vice Mayor Carroll, if you could give the invocation, pray not just for us and our town, but also for our country.
We're thankful for this town and its residents. We're grateful for all the work for the betterment of our community and all the service they have. That those who work here and those who serve here be ever mindful of the town's vision and mission statement. Grant this council the wisdom to govern the conflicting interests and issues of our time, the ability to work together in harmony even when there is honest disagreement, sense of the welfare and true needs of our people, personal peace in our lives, and joy in our town.
Amen. If you'll join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you, everyone. I'm always asked to give the reminder if council is going to speak to please press the green light button so that it's on and then lean into the microphone. If we could take the roll call for this budget workshop meeting, please.
Mayor Foley?
Here.
Vice Mayor Carroll?
Here.
Councilmember Alwater?
Here.
Councilmember Altieri? Here. Let the record show all members are present with the exception of Councilmember Smith.
All right, terrific. Let's move to item 2, the budget overview and discussion. At the outset, I know Mike Oxner is in the audience. On behalf of the Finance Committee, I'd like to please convey our thanks. I know it's a lot of work that you do, and there are some recommendations that were put through. We do read the letters, we do read the recommendations, and we consider them very carefully. I know that deferring to the people with much more extensive finance backgrounds than I have, I find them particularly helpful. In particular, I noted the 6% salary comment that, okay, 4.8% looks to be what the across-the-board number was in Florida. I did take that into account. I think on balance, given the overall savings, the differential where I came out on it, Mike, is that we're demanding more and more excellence from our people, and we want retention, and we want to reward excellence, and so I personally came out comfortably with the 6% salary increase. The next item I found very interesting was the notion of annexing the Island Club. Now I know that's popped up from time to time. We've had some discussions about annexing or exploring the annexation of other areas. So I think that's something we ought to certainly have a discussion about if the people of the Island Club are interested in doing it. I know that if we start taking tax revenue away from one jurisdiction, sometimes it ruffles some feathers, but at the end of the day, it's really up to the people. So without objection, I think it's probably worthwhile for us to have our town manager and our town attorney kind of explore it and put together a process. Yeah, sure.
So back when Richard Jefferson was town manager, I came up with this notion about the annexation, and I asked him to do it sort of on the down low, and he wrote a letter and trashed the sheriff's department as part of that letter, and of course everything just blew up. And then at the time we were involved with litigation with the city, and I met with the Homeowners Association at that time, and they thought we were just looking for money to help support our lawsuit against the town or the city. And so that's why it kind of fell apart. I mean, Richard didn't do what I'd asked him to do, and of course disparaged the sheriff's department, which wasn't the point. The point was that they're adjacent. It's if they vote to say yes, we vote to say yes, they win because they get a great public safety department, which is closer, and their taxes go down. I mean, it's like a win-win, and plus our base expands. So, I mean, that was kind of the motivation. So, anyway.
I think it's something that's worth looking into. You know, these ideas of annexation pop up from time to time, and not to minimize, you know, the scope and the wisdom of this project, but given some of the other larger scale annexations that are going on, I can't imagine we'll evoke as much ire from potentially the county from others. I think it's I agree with you. I think it's a win-win. So.
And the fact that it got included in the letter, I had mentioned it sort of offhand at our meeting, and everybody jumped on the idea. So that's how it got in the letter.
That's fine. So, all right. Thanks so much, Mike.
What jurisdiction does it fall into now?
I beg your pardon?
What jurisdiction does it fall into now, the island club?
It's the county.
The county, but not a municipality?
No, just the county. And because it's contiguous, it's pretty simple. They just have to vote yes as a HOA, and then it comes to the town, and we vote.
Right.
I have a couple comments. First, Mike, has anybody talked to the current owners? Have any sense of their interest?
Not to my knowledge, but when I spoke to them way back then,
Yeah.
they were interested,
Right.
but like I said, they had reservations.
Okay, all right. I think we should do that before we put a lot of effort in it. And
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, and second of all, in terms of ruffling feathers, it didn't stop the city of Vero Beach annexing that small piece of ground behind 7-Eleven that was unincorporated county. So I wouldn't be concerned about
Yeah,
that.
I think my original request was for Richard Jefferson to go appear at an HOA meeting there and just
Right.
take their temperature. But instead, he wrote this letter that became sort of a bombshell.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, why don't we do this? I think Councilman Elwater raises an excellent point as well. Why don't we have Mr. Harpring, you know, work with? We can't delegate as a council something to a committee like you, but we can delegate to staff. Temperature read. I think it'd be helpful for council members and the public to know from Mr. Sweeney just what's involved in the process. What I know about it, I remember only from the bar exam several years ago, but my recollection is the same. We don't have any donut hole issues. It's contiguous, and it's that really complicated part of the annexation statute we don't even need to pay attention to. It's just yes, and then it's in. I do think, we should certainly find out if the HOA is interested before we waste a lot of staff time on it. And if there is an interest, they're probably going to have to go through their own process. I mean,
Sure.
an HOA is probably going to have a vote. I don't know what their declaration says for the homeowners association, but I'm sure that there's probably something in there that their lawyers are going to want to look at. So are we in agreement? So why don't we, does September sound reasonable to get back to us with a report as part of the manager's report? Okay, great.
Under state statute, does it require a supermajority of the people there, or?
My recollection is it does not. I believe it's 50% plus one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, thanks so much.
Since, Mr. Mayor, since you made a comment about the first bullet point, can the rest of us as well?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. With regard to your 6% salary increase or pushback on the part of the committee, I understand where you're coming from. I looked at inflation rates going back 2 or 3 years, and I see the 6% is certainly lower than the last 12 months inflation rate, but it's a bit of a catch-up from the previous year when that wasn't the case. So that's why I'm in agreement with doing the 6% this year. Next year is an open book.
I don't think the pushback was so much about the number, the 6%, but it was across the board,
Okay.
as opposed to providing for a 6% pool, perhaps, and then giving out on
Okay.
merit.
All right.
That's the difference.
All right, thank you for the clarification.
Right, and just so we're crystal clear on this, that's a budget number. I mean, there's discretion within the town manager to, I think, given the standards that we're insisting upon, hopefully everybody, makes the maximum of their salary increase, but there's also room there, if there isn't good performance, to take care of it, other than the collective bargaining agreement, of course. it's a budget number, but the points are well taken. So the next item was not specifically addressed in the Finance Committee minutes, but I want to raise it because members of the public actually brought it up, and that is, it goes as follows. And, my rule is if 3 or more people bring something to me, given the size of our town, I bring it to the council, because perhaps you've heard similar things. And it goes like this. Gee, the rate of inflation's really hit us very hard, particularly the condominium owners. There have been massive assessments in anticipation of the the structural integrity reserve studies and the anticipated costs. There have been massive increase in insurance for condominium associations that are hitting people hard in the pocketbook. Now, we are an affluent community, but no community is immune from some people feeling, a pinch. So the question was, with the increase in property values and keeping the mill rate the same, why wouldn't we do a rollback to give some? Well, wait a minute, I'll let you go, but why wouldn't we do a rollback in order to give some relief? So, in looking at the numbers and balancing that against, putting money in reserves, it's a $600,000 difference. If you kind of put that across all the taxpayers, particularly the folks that were thinking it's not a hugely significant amount of money to go back into somebody's pockets. It is, however, a significant amount of money to build up our reserves. I also took a look at the sale of land from 2017, and we're starting to draw down on that. So we're looking at that money eventually running out. So I think we've dodged some bullets with weather impact. I think we can be mindful of the fact that we'd be well advised to prepare for worse weather impacts. Beach erosion's about as bad as I've seen it. Now I know we have some assistance. So to those of us in this position, and saying this to the folks in the community who ask, why not a rollback? I hear you. I looked at it. At least this voice, this one vote on the dais says, I think as a community we're better off keeping the mill rate where it is, resisting the temptation to do a rollback, and building up our reserves. Those are my comments on the overall budget. So did you want to talk about the rollback, Mike, and then we'll turn it over to council?
Yes, thanks. So obviously the budget that we reviewed did not have the increased revenues because we met in May. And so that $700,000 roughly in increased revenues were, I'll say, a pleasant surprise, but also the fact that it looked like it was all going into reserves is a concern. And granted that the refund or the reduction in millage would make a significant amount in individuals' pockets, but the fact is it's their money, it's not the town's money. And, you talk about weather impacts, and I think back to Gene and Francis, which was the biggest one we had. We had about $1 million of out-of-pocket costs, but most of it was reimbursed by insurance. Mm-hmm. And so the whole notion was that you need cash when you need cash, but most of it's going to get reimbursed. So the reserve doesn't need to be that big. And so at the time when I was on council, we decided that, $2 million was plenty. And so anything beyond that, I think that, you should just give to the citizens back regardless. Mm-hmm.
All right. No, I understand. There are different perspectives on it. And just in response to that, I'm sure many of us up here, and perhaps you went to these conferences where they talk about FEMA reimbursements, and the one thing that I always pay attention to is it can be 2 to 3 years before you get reimbursement. So that if we underfund the reserves, we'd be required to go out, try to get some funding in place to borrow at higher interest rates now to cover that. And then the clawback percentage has been fairly astronomical for disaster agencies that provide money to municipalities. And just in the back of my mind, I always keep thinking, Mexico Beach, Mexico Beach. I mean, that was a town that thought that they were in pretty good shape with reserves, and, they got obliterated. So I appreciate your comments. That's just where I come out, so good. Anybody else on any of these items? So, Mr. Alwater, you want to go first, and we'll
Okay.
move left to right?
Yeah, I agree with the mayor. Last fall, I drove through Fort Myers Beach, and we all know about the waves that came crashing through there and so forth. It sort of reminded me of pictures of Tokyo after bombings by B-29 bombers. There's literally nothing there. I just think we're in an area where there's bigger issues that we might have to deal with. There may come to a point in time where we're going to have to spend town money on sand. I mean, it's a constant struggle to try to get the state to do the right thing. We're still not designated as a critically eroded beach in most of the town's beach, in spite of, in my case, I started fighting this back when I was a citizen in 2015, when the then coastal engineer basically indicated we didn't exist. We've come a long way with the county, and I'm very appreciative of what they're doing, but I could see a situation where we have to dump sand on the beach, and some people will say, well, you're just protecting the oceanfront houses. Well, it impacts everything in this town. You don't want to be the oceanfront when those houses are wiped away. The other thing, we made progress on cyber security. I think a lot of progress, but there's other things that we have to do. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about those here in a public setting. And discussions with the town manager, just one-on-one, he pointed out that we do have some public streets here that we're probably going to have to get repaved, and in the process tear them up to make sure that we have sewers, because there is a state mandate to have it done by, is it 28 or 30? 30, okay.
Yes, sir.
And now the reality is everything I've heard is that the communities around the state are not going to get that done, but we want to get that done and move on. So I think for those reasons, and I agree with Mike, we always have to think about it as it's their money, and we're taking and hopefully using it for the right thing. But I think it's, we've made a lot of good steps. You look at the sale of the land, which I pushed, and back then the millage rate went down 19%. So we did give a lot of money back to the taxpayers, rightfully so, because it's their money. So I'm okay with the reserves as we stand right now. And also the reality of the situation is that most people here, in terms of their appraised value, are subject to the 2% cap. So that's the other thing. Some people moved in recently and are not Florida residents. Who knows where their appraised value is going to go up, but most of us are subject to that 2% cap. So I'm okay with that. We haven't discussed their third bullet point. A motion was made and passed unanimously to recommend town council consider requiring all legal fees in excess of $500,000 charged by one firm on one matter. We have a lot of lawyers up here on this dais. I'd be interested in people's opinion, those people in particular, on that. But they can't determine whether a particular line item is appropriate or not. So that's a distinction without a difference. So I think that there's a huge difference between sale of property a few years ago and increase in assessed value of properties in any given year. I think it was entirely appropriate that council took the steps they did in the aftermath of the sale of the property. I view that as an extraordinary event, a one-off event. And I think council made the correct decision at that time. With regard to the most recent increase in appraised value, I don't favor a rollback. Property values we're blessed, I guess, that the trend has been up over the last several years. But that's not to say that the trend may not, it will not last, probably, and it may go in the other direction for a while. So I'm in agreement with the mayor and Councilmember Allwater. I do not favor a rollback. And with regard to the $500,000, the legal fee, I agree with the mayor on that as well. I don't see any reason to spend the time or the money engaging in that kind of analysis. So those are my comments.
I would join in each of the comments from Councilman Atwater, Councilman Carroll, and the mayor. And with respect to the audit of legal fees, I've, in my career, found that the best audit is the audit at the beginning of the engagement, not the audit at the end of the engagement. And the best way to cabin legal fees is at the onset of an engagement that you think is going to be a serious engagement. You require council to provide a very detailed budget, a timeline for the projects that you think can be anticipated in it, and then you're really, the best audit happens every month when the legal fees come across the transom. It's fresh in everybody's mind, and I think the town manager does a great job, frankly, in keeping a lid on legal fees. And I think also that the likelihood that the town, in any matter, other than the ones that we've had in connection with the recent litigation, the antitrust litigation and the rate litigation, the likelihood that the town is going to face legal fees from one law firm in one period of $500,000 is fairly rare. And when you get caught up in a matter like that, you know what you're in, and it really comes down to day-to-day management, working together with council, not on a yearly look back, but as you're doing it on a monthly basis. And I think that's probably the most effective way to keep a lid on legal fees.
All right, thank you very much. Public comment. Is there any public comment? You've heard pretty much everything we have to say, and the good work that the Finance Committee said. If there's no public comment, all right, we'll move to recommendations. We do not vote at this workshop. We have recommendations. The recommendations that will be taken up at the regularly scheduled town council meeting, which follows as soon as we adjourn this meeting, I suppose would be to adopt the proposed millage rate of 1.3349. And then the other item would be to set a tentative millage rate. Now, we typically in the past set that higher, and it's not because we anticipate it going higher, it's because it gives us flexibility in between now and the time the final adoption of the budget, if anything were to happen. With the amount of reserves we have in, I don't see the need to set the tentative millage rate any higher than proposed in the budget, which would be 1.3349. That would be my recommendation, send both of that. Council, any discussion on that?
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with it.
No discussion.
All right, wonderful. That's going to conclude our budget meeting, budget workshop meeting, unless council has anything else, or our town treasurer or town manager has anything else to add. All right, great. So we are in adjournment, but hang on to your hat.